Go ahead and get started. So as Liz mentioned, I'm the Storm Data Program Manager at headquarters, and I've been in this role for about 2 years, 2 years now, and worked with Landon a little bit when he started out as WCM and there in Guam. And so we've touched base off and on a few storm data related things and Liz as well. But it'll be nice to get some of the other folks here involved, and of course Ian with you coming on board and eventually taking over this for Liz. It'll be great to chat with you as well. So what I did today was I put together, there we go. I put together some background info about how, administrative type things about why storm data is important, why we do it, who uses it, some of the rules and things like that. And I've got a few slides that talk about verification too. Not that Joshua, you're directly involved in verification, but storm data is used in verification, so it's good. So it's good for awareness. Eventually, we will start verifying things at the national level for Guam one of these days. But we're headed in that direction, and it'll serve you well if you ever go, somewhere else where we go beyond Guam too, because as I was telling Landon in our last meeting, a lot of folks still, even seasoned veterans are in the agency, still aren't really aware of how verification is done at the national level. So it'll be good and educational for a lot of folks. And then I'll talk about some best practices, some myths, some pitfalls, things like that. And then I have I pulled out a few specific event examples just to go into in more detail. The ones that you'll be using more frequently than others in Guam and American Samoa. Just so you can, just to give you some of the more detailed information behind those. So at any time, if anybody has any questions, wants to interject, please do. And we'll go from there. Don't feel like you have to wait for a question or to ask a question or anything like that. And yes, Landon, I'll email you these when
Thank you. You offered for questions, so there you go.
you have the link in your email already. From Remember, I sent you the draft of the slides a few weeks ago. So you should already have it, the link in there to Google Slides.
Perfect.
So why is storm data important? Storm data is important for two main reasons. One, it's our agency's official record of significant, unusual, and high impact weather, and that's straight out of the Storm Data Directive 10-1605. Storm data dates back a long time. Historically, we have loose forms of handwritten storm data at NCEI going back to the 1950s. It was all handwritten and piecemeal for a long, long time, up until the mid to late 90s. But so that leads to the next point, is that first and foremost, storm data was designed as an observation database. And then in the 2000s, when the GIPRA Act was passed by Congress in the early 2000s, and all of a sudden we were required to report GIPRA scores to Congress and other agencies on an annual basis. we needed an easy way to essentially verify our warnings, and to do that we use storm data. So storm data became a means for performing verification as well. Now we don't do that. We don't do any national level verification for your offices, but like I said, that will likely change here in the future, especially for you, Landon and Joshua, as you start moving more towards um, the way that products are issued in the CONUS, and to some extent Alaska region. Did you have a question, Landon? No. Okay. Your hand is raised on the GoToMeeting, so that's why I'm asking.
I forgot to
um,
unrate.
gotcha. Okay. So I'll talk more about verification in a minute. The storm data itself consists of the database program, which we maintain in the performance and evaluation branch here at headquarters, and then the storm events database, which is maintained maintained at NCEI and is open to the public. And that database that they maintain is an exact copy of ours. They just display the data a little bit differently and a little bit more, I would say, incomplete. They out of the maybe 40 or 45 different parameters that are captured by the various storm data events, they publicly only display about 8 or 9 of those information fields on their webpage, but they have all the raw data files back um, 30, 40 years to where people can download copies of our raw data files and do research with them, or look up past events. And I'll talk more about that in a minute as well. Back up until 2018, for those who were in the weather service before then, you may remember, back like when I started in the weather service, you would get a PDF, you would get a physical hard copy of the monthly storm data from NCEI in paper format. They transferred that over to a digital format, PDF only, before they discontinued that in late 2018, and now it's just all available via their web interface and the downloadable files. Some key points: storm data is office specific, and that means that when you all have accounts, or at least Landon and Liz, and does Joshua have an account on our website? I think he does, right?
Yeah, I
I,
said.
yeah.
Okay. Um, on our website, the performance management website, which is where the storm data program is, you have an account profile, which you should do your best to keep up to date with your office information, the office where you're at, and well, I guess you guys don't use AVNFPS, right?
Yeah, we do.
You
We
do.
do.
Okay. So your forecaster ID in your profile needs to match um, your forecaster ID in AV and FPS, because ultimately when we start doing, ultimately when it comes to TAF verification, that's how TAFs are matched up for verification purposes. But wherever you go, make sure your office info and your forecaster ID are up to date, because sometimes that will change too. Um, there's various permission levels for the programs on our website, and that unlocks more access capabilities. Um, for instance, Joshua, you would need to be a StormDat user in order to be able to enter storm data events for Guam. Um, Landon is a power user, which means he can certify the events. Um, but Joshua, you would not have access to that. Ultimately, that's usually reserved for the WCM sometimes the MIC or SU if there's no WCM, so on and so forth. The permission levels are assignable by your MIC. They're designated as a local manager in our system, which means that every MIC can control the employees within the access of their employees within their own office. Everything on our website and everything in Storm Data is office-based, which is why it's important to have your office up to date in your profile, in your account information. Some key points. If you have a single but recurring event, it must be entered in one county or zone per month format. So for example, if you have an ongoing drought that lasts for 3 months and impacts 3 zones, that would be 9 separate events. The reason being that in the current storm data program, we cannot, everything has to be entered on a month-by-month basis. We can't enter events that span across a calendar month or across a calendar year. So everything is pigeonholed month by month, and zone or county by zone or county. We're going to improve that in a future program, which we're still working on right now, but we're unable to change that for the time being with this program.
Hey, Gordon, I have a question.
Yeah, Ian.
On the, you were saying you want to make sure when you move offices that your name goes with that office. So I moved from the Honolulu forecast office to the regional office. Can I put in any events at the regional level, or it has to be from the WFOs or the WSO?
No, you can't. So you wouldn't be able to enter events, Ian, but you would still be able to. You would be able to, as a regional employee, go in and look at and be able to run verification statistics for. I guess it would really only be for Honolulu, and look at their data and things like that. But you wouldn't physically be able to enter. You wouldn't be able to enter storm data. I'll leave it at that. There are some other things you might be able to do, like you might be able to enter outreach events and NOAA
Okay.
for the regional office, but I would have to look into that and see, because
Yeah.
I know like the tsunami warning centers can do that. You might be able to do that too, but I would have to look into that one.
All right. I'm just
I was
wondering
gonna say,
where the regional office can help out our field offices.
yeah, Liz here. I was just gonna say we can put stuff in NOAA, but it's generally been done at the local office level. So
Yeah. Thanks, Liz. So changing events.
Sorry, I wanted to say something about that. Is that something that you can really consider, Gordon, especially for our office that has no SU or WCM? It'd be really great if we can get that help from regional at times when we really cannot do it.
I guess the only challenge with that is that everything is office dependent. So there's no way for the program to recognize Ian, for example, as your employee if he works at the region. There's no way we can change that. We can change the programming of the program to make that work. I suppose a way around that could be Ian or Liz may be able to change their account profile for for a day, let's say, or even an hour, just to enter events on your behalf and change themselves to be make it look like they work for your office, right? Like a proxy, yeah. But if you need that, I can look into that with Ian and Liz and see if that will work. And I would have to provide them with appropriate access levels. But I've honestly never tried doing it on behalf of somebody else before, so I think it will work, but I'm not 100% sure. But I can work with them on that if you need me to.
Hey, thanks, Gordon. I
Yeah.
think that might be good to look into for those emergency cases where the offices are just swamped and they won't get to it for quite some time.
Okay. Let me write myself a note, so I will take a look at that.
Yeah, it'd probably just be a rare case for Pacific region. I don't see other regions doing this.
No, I've never had that request from or discussion with any of the other regions. But the other regions offices are usually fully staffed and so on and so forth and have a full management team. So let's see. So let me take a quick note. Okay. So Ian, I'll go in and play with your profile a little bit tomorrow and see it and try it out and see if it'll work. So if you get some automated emails saying that your profile information had changed or something, that's just me going in there and trying to see what we can do.
Okay, great.
All right. Changing past events. At the local office level, you can only change events that are less than 18 months old. Any event that's more than 18 months old has to be changed by me, going back until October 2006, which is when the database for the current program starts. If there are any old changes like that, please email me and I can make them for you. And then they can be recertified at the office level. We can make older changes than that, but they have to be done directly by NCEI. Stuart Hinson is the POC over there, but if you have older changes prior to October of 2006, you can send them to me as well, and I can reach out to him on your behalf. Now, for the Guam folks, as you folks just started issuing LSRs, I'm not sure if we have your LSRs in our system yet, but in general, offices can import LSRs into storm data if they're flood or thunderstorm related. So it's limited to the 9 event types that are listed there. In the future, we will be expanding that in the new storm data program to pretty much every or almost every LSR event type, but we're not quite there with the new program yet. Still in the testing phase. And a reminder, we only maintain the StormDAT program and verification. The LSR program is maintained by the Severe Weather Program. Things like eclairs and whatnot are maintained by them as well. Verification. How verification works is a verifiable event that's entered in storm data triggers matching by our verification program, and it seeks out a warning that might exist in the same zone around or county around the same time. Only certified events are used in the official verification statistics, the GIPR statistics. That's where our 60-day grace period comes into effect, that we try to emphasize entering all of your storm data by 60 days after the last day of the month. That's because our verification program will run on a nightly basis up until 60 days after the end of a calendar month, and then after that it's only triggered by event entry. So it really is a way to keep verification statistics up current and up to date in the system. There are 5 verification groups there. I'll skip over winter as it's the winter verification as it's not necessarily appropriate. And Charles Klipfeld, Chuck is our verification program manager. If you ever have any verification specific questions, you can reach out to him or ask them through me. So the different verification types, I'll go through these pretty quickly. Convective verification for severe thunderstorm warnings. As you probably remember from your training, we verify storm data if hail events of 1 inch diameter or greater, or thunderstorm wind gusts of 50 knots or greater. Tornado warnings are only verified by tornado events and storm data. And then we perform a third type that's not listed here, which is generic severe thunderstorm warning, which means, or I should say, generic severe thunderstorm verification, which verifies severe thunderstorm warnings using tornado events and storm data also. So you would have that third event type to potentially verify a severe thunderstorm warning. It would be the hail, thunderstorm, wind, or tornado to verify severe thunderstorm warning. That's not an official GIPRA method, though. It's to keep it separated, but recognizing that a tornado is a form of severe weather, we do offer that verification option on our webpage as well. Water verification, flash flood warnings are verified by flash flood or debris flow events that are entered in storm data. Again, only certified events. Marine verification, we still use the 3/4 inch or greater diameter hail for marine hail events. And marine thunderstorm wind gusts 34 knots or greater, or water spouts. All 3 will verify a special marine warning. I think that's also probably pretty well known. And the other marine verification that we offer is flood related. And this is a little tricky here, but a coastal flood event in storm data will verify a coastal flood warning. And then either a lakeshore flood event or a SAISH event in storm data will verify a lakeshore flood warning issued by an office. And then we have non-precipitation verification, and that's high wind events and storm data verify high wind warnings. There are several events, I guess, event paradigms I refer them to in storm data, where we have events that are based off of advisory or warning criteria. Wind is one of them. We have high wind warning. We have high wind events, which are supposed to match up to events which meet high wind warning criteria. And then we have strong wind events in storm data, which would match up to wind events that meet advisory level criteria, for example.
Hey, Gordon.
Yes. Who's that?
This is Ian. On the marine verification stuff, I was watching your knobology video one, and you mentioned that the marine stuff is going away. Is that still true, or?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ian. In the new, so two-pronged answer. There's a bunch of LSR program updates coming in the fall, and the LSR programs will be removing the marine hail, marine thunderstorm wind event types. In addition, in anticipation of the new storm data program, which will be, when it's released, is removing the marine designated event types. So once we release the new program within the next 1 to 2 years, the marine hail, marine thunderstorm wind, marine lightning, marine hurricane, marine tropical storm, all of those will be going away. You would just, in that new program, it uses the official public marine and fire weather zone shapefiles to determine event location. So you would essentially call up a hail event, and the program will give you the option of clicking in your counties or your public marine, or your counties or your marine zones, and you would just click and enter it in the marine zone, and it would automatically assign that hail event to the marine zone rather than having to call it specifically a marine hail event. Does that make
Oh, okay.
sense?
So it's not, it's just moving into a different way of doing it.
Right, right. Instead of having a hail event and a marine hail event in storm data, they'll all just be called hail. Um, and the program itself will reference the appropriate zone or county or zone where they're entered.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions before I keep going? Okay. Damage estimates. This is a big challenge for our folks, is accurately estimating damage caused by events. There are a lot of issues here. One is that the damage estimates are not something that's regularly made available to us. A lot of it is through, a lot of our offices get them through FEMA or other local, state, or federal government agencies. If and when there's a big event, if there's a smaller, event like a tree falling on a house or something like that, those events are harder to get damage estimates, our folks to get damage estimates for. Thankfully, Todd Shea, who is now the MIC at WFO La Crosse, but he was the WCM there for a long time, over the years put together a damage estimate guide, which is linked here, and also I believe in one of those recorded webinars that I sent along as well. So this guide is a very rough estimate. It gives you a starting point. I would say a lot of these estimate ranges are probably for the CONUS. Your estimates out there might be quite a bit higher for some of these replacement costs, simply because cost of replacement is higher based on the fact that everything has to get on a plane or a boat to get to you. It's not, you can't just, walk over to a construction manufacturer and buy, 20 sheets of roof shingles, for example. Is this guide on the Storm Data portal? It is in the documents section of the Storm Data VLab page if you're on there. And it's also linked here so that when Landon or Liz or Ian sends out the slides, you should be able to click on the link and get to it. Actually, I can copy and paste the link in the chat too. I have a hard time accessing VLab. Well, let's see. That's the link to where it should be on Google Docs. If you can load that link on Google Docs, it should be good. In terms of damage estimates, I am running a Lantern group since September that's been looking at our damage estimates, trying to analyze them and come up with a best practices sheet. We just sent out a Google form survey to the different regions to get responses about how offices conduct damage estimates, what they use most frequently, and we're trying to put together a best practices document that will go along with this estimates guide, kind of in tandem, talking about some things to consider with damage estimates, maybe suggestions for how to incorporate inflation or other things like that. And remember the last point here, flood and flash flood events are, damage estimates are required. Everything else, they're optional but encouraged. But for flood and flash flood events specifically, we have an MOU with the Army Corps of Engineers in which the Water Resources Services branch here at headquarters provides them with an annual flood report, an annual flood loss report, which includes fatalities and total estimated damage, which again can be from a variety of sources, but damage that our folks report through storm data. Moving on, other aspects of storm data, fatalities, we have and injuries. There's direct fatalities and injuries and indirect fatalities and injuries. Direct is basically the weather was a direct was an active agent in the cause of death or the cause of injury. And indirect fatality or injury is maybe something where the weather was a passive entity, something occurred after a death or injury occurred after the fact. Like I'll give an example, and there's more examples on the next slide. But if you were in a parked car and a severe thunderstorm knocked a tree down on your car and you died, that would be a direct fatality. If you were driving your car and you drove it into a tree that was knocked down by the severe thunderstorm 2 days ago but hadn't been cleared yet, that would be an indirect fatality because the weather caused the tree to go down, but it didn't cause you to drive into it, essentially. So that's one way of looking at that. And note that only direct fatalities and injuries are counted in official NWS statistics and reports through all the various formats. But all of the data is downloadable from the NCEI Storm Events database, which I was talking about earlier. So somebody can go in, any researcher, other government agency can go in to NCEI's website and download the indirect fatality and injury statistics for their purposes as well. Here's some more examples of direct versus indirect fatalities. These are all pulled out of the directive. We try in the directive to give examples of direct and indirect fatalities for almost every event type as we can. Another example of direct versus indirect I like to use is lightning. If you're directly struck by lightning or lightning strikes a tree that you're standing under and kills you, that would be a direct fatality. But if lightning struck a part of your home and started a fire, which you could not get out, which you could not get away from, that would be an indirect fatality. Other examples of indirect fatalities are driving in any loss of visibility. For example, whether it's due to dust or dense fog or blizzard, any visibility reducing hazards is indirect. And there's a question in the chat, how come the fog one is not direct? And I don't know, I wasn't around when storm data was created and this direct versus indirect situation was created, but my take on it is, I guess, that the reasoning is that you have an option to not keep driving in poor visibility. You can pull over, you can stay home. The weather isn't causing you to drive. Whereas you don't have the option to avoid a tree falling on your car because the wind blew it over as you were driving under it. I don't know if that quite answers the question. What if you can't pull over because one side in the mountain one side is the mountain and the other side is a steep cliff? That's a good question. I think for, I think it's, it's a unique circumstance, and I can appreciate the question. But I think, I think sticking with the overall sentiment in storm data and the overall policy is that visibility related fatalities are indirect, and so are indirect. So are any accident, whether it's vehicle or slipping on a vehicle on an ice covered road or walking on a slippery sidewalk or something of that nature, those are also treated as indirect fatalities. Though, admittedly, vehicle accidents on snow covered roads are not going to be much of a concern for you folks. Yes, it is complicated, and we get these from time to time. We get questions, or I get questions about these where people are having trouble determining direct versus indirect. So if you ever have trouble with that, you can ask questions through. You can ask me questions directly. You can go through Ian or Liz, whoever is responsible for storm data at a given time, and they can ask me as well. You can ask another WCM or somebody whom has more experience. There are a lot of resources available. Event narratives. So event narratives are only required for tornado, thunderstorm, wind, and lightning events. But due to the nature of storm data being an observation database, where we really try to encourage folks to attempt them for other event types where you have more information available, especially when you have a significant, when you have damage. If you have if you have a tree down in one of your counties from a severe thunderstorm and it causes damage. The way storm data itself, you'll be able to enter a rough location or in reference to a city or town, for example. But in the event narrative, you can add more information, like the tree was down on Green Street and damaged 3 cars, fell on top of 3 cars, causing damage and injuries to 4 children, or something like that. The reason for that is that researchers and emergency managers are using our data quite frequently.
Can I stay for 1 second?
Go ahead, Liz.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. I didn't realize I wasn't muted. Sorry, I'm heading out in just a minute. My apologies,
Okay.
guys.
Thanks, Liz. Good luck. So a lot of external users are using our storm data through NCEI, and they're using the event narratives. NIST recently data mined all of our event narratives and cross-referenced them with DAT tornado tracks to try and determine in the past decade the full number of school buildings that have been impacted by tornadoes. That's one example. I just read a preprint of that paper. CDC, various arms of the CDC are using our data, our storm data, especially our fatality data as it's related to temperatures. So all of these reasons are why storm data is a valuable tool. Emergency managers use them to determine repetitive loss or recurrence of hurricanes or flash floods, things of that nature, when applying for state or federal level grants. So there's a lot of that work going on outside. Inside the agency, the event narratives really help to capture impacts, and we're trying to emphasize especially in the winter weather program. The winter weather program is really interested in doing impact-based verification, and that's something that the agency is probably going to be moving towards, and then within the next 5 to 10 years is more and more impact-based verification. So right now, WPC runs the Winter Storm Severity Index, or WSSI. Those are verified. That product, right, that rates the like a snowstorm impact from 0 to 5 or 1 to 5. It's like nuisance impact to catastrophic impact or extreme impact. I forget the categorizations. But they verify that since it's not a criteria-based index, they verify that by looking at the storm data event narratives. And things like that that type of verification will become more common in the agency moving forward. Also, please try to be consistent in your event entry and your event narratives. Maybe not as huge of an issue with the relative infrequency of events out in Pacific region compared to some of the CONUS regions like Central and Southern region, but some offices keep track of fatalities and events and damage on a month-by-month basis using a Google Sheet, so that if they have more than one person doing storm data entries, they can more easily keep track and communicate what's been entered, what hasn't, so we don't get things like fatalities left out or entered in duplicate matter, for example. Oop, sorry about that. Well, hold on, my mouse is not cooperating. Okay, here we go. So I mentioned the Storm Data VLab community on here earlier. There's the link to it. You may have some issues going directly to the link, but if you're not in it already and you would like to be, you can just email me and I can add you to it. People also ask storm data related questions through the WCM community on VLab. So those are good ways of crowdsourcing answers or trying to figure out an answer on how to handle a tricky situation or a tricky event or that you want to create in storm data as well. Pause for questions. Any questions? Any more questions, rather?
I guess a real quick question. We're supposed to require damages for all flooding events, correct? Is what you said earlier? Does that
Yes.
also
Flood and flash
include?
flood.
Okay. Does that also include the Federal State of Micronesia or the Republic of Madrid and Palau, which are kind of like our other nations that we have a compact with, that we provide forecasts for? So we try our best to also get as much damage estimates for those places as well.
Landon, I'm going to ask you to jump in. I know you guys can enter events for Palau specifically, and I believe Tinian is still one too, right? Tinian is still one in our system.
And I remember you and I had that discussion, I think sometime last year in 2020 about these zones regarding the CNMI, because I think we have Guam, Rota, and then Saipan. And so I think Tinian and Saipan are linked together by proxy because they're like 3 miles apart. So I think that's how it is. But as far as the compacts, we do issue events and stuff for the compacts, like for the drought statements. We're issuing those drought statements. And so we do include those within an event narrative and any impacts, likewise for tropical cyclones. And so we do have I just got this from the Yap state government, the Typhoon Malakas assessment report from the damage. And so I sent that to Joshua and Mike Ziobo yesterday. So that would all go ultimately into the report. So I still need to look through it. It's 35 pages long. So we got to see what's in it and then I guess summarize it and provide those details. But we would give estimates for like flooding impacts. Gordon, would that include storm surge? If there's like inundation, I guess that would classify as flooding and thus damage estimate needed.
So storm surge, So it's not required for storm surge. The only specific storm data events it's required for are flood or flash flood. So that's
Freshwater flooding.
right, freshwater flooding or river flooding. Anything non-marine, non-ocean related. But that being said, if you have the information and you can enter it, by all means enter it.
Okay.
More complete the more incomplete the more complete information, the better.
The better.
Okay.
Yeah,
Copy.
that eventually came out right. And I talk a little bit here in a few slides how to handle tropical cyclone events. So we'll bring Joshua up to speed on that. So I was going to go through four event specific items here with you folks that are some of the most likely concerns. Not all of them, of course. But some of the more likely events based on the historical database that you'll be entering there, Joshua, and Landon, and Pago. I'll try to go through these here. I know we're running out of time a little bit, but I can stay over if others are able to. I can stay on a little bit extra. Flash flood events. In addition to flash flood, in addition to the damage amounts or damage estimates being required, flash flood events have to be entered as a polygon. Most other events are point based, or you have the ability to enter them as a polygon. Flash flood events must be entered as a polygon with at least 4 vertices in the system, and that's because our verification program matches the flash flood warning polygon with the event polygon, and we calculate a percentage covered both aerially and in time to arrive at the verification at our verification statistics. So even if you enter a huge flash flood warning for an entire county, but you get a very, very small area of flash flooding, for example, or a very, very big island or a whole island in your case, as it may be. But the actual flash flood only occurs in a small area. Then you still have to enter a 4-point polygon to denote that area, even if it's just a less than a quarter square mile. But you can do that in the system. You can also enter multiple flash flood events per zone. If you have a large zone, but you get 3 separate areas of flash flooding that span, maybe over the course of a 20-mile wide zone, and they're not all connected, you can enter 3 separate events with 3 separate polygons to note those areas. You'll also hear on the details screen, which is the next tab here, you'll have to enter the flood cause for flood, flash flood, and debris flow events. So the options are usually heavy rain associated with a tropical system, ice jam, dam break. I forget what the 5th option is, but there's 5. And then here's where you enter the crop and property damage. Again, for flash flood, some form of damage amount estimate is required. And try to remember, if you can, to distinguish between flooding and flash flooding, because we do have flood and flash flood events separated out in storm data. Right, low impact flooding, which doesn't pose a significant threat to life and property. That would be a flood event, not a flash flood event. If you get 10 inches of rain in 2 hours and you have water entering homes and 4 foot deep on roads, then that's obviously a significant threat to life and property, and that's a flash flood. But sometimes folks get washed up in there. And if you look at the directive, there's a flow chart and questions to ask yourself and your emergency managers to help guide you through the process if you're unsure if something was a flood or flash flood, and maybe falls in between those criteria. But there's a process laid out there to help you determine that and enter it as the right event type. Hurricane, typhoon events. Of course, these are delineated by their wind speed, just as they are at NHC. So you have hurricane/typhoon, you have tropical storm, you have tropical depression, and then their marine counterparts: marine hurricane, marine tropical storm, marine tropical depression. So you can enter. You can. Trying to think of how to best word this. You can add an event for either a hurricane or typhoon per zone. When you do that, basically, let me back up. You would create an episode for the hurricane, typhoon, what have you, tropical storm, whatever the entity was. Then you would create individual events for the zones that were impacted by the hurricane or typhoon or tropical storm. So if you have, I guess you have 8 or 9 zones in our system in Guam, but only 4 of them were impacted by the typhoon, then you would only enter typhoon events for those 4 zones. It's a little tricky here with the tropical events, how to break them out. But the typhoon or tropical storm or tropical depression event type in storm data is only meant to be a placeholder for the wind damage that occurred as a result of the tropical system. All the other specific impacts are separated out as their own event type within that episode. So flash flooding, tornadoes, if you had a water spout, storm surge, all those other hazards would be separated out as their own event types within that episode, not included within the typhoon event itself. The reason for that, one, is to prevent double counting of fatalities in our system, but two, also to track the specific fatalities and damage amounts by event type as we go through the course of the year. And I'll show you an example here on the next page. Flooding along the coast, even if it's from distant swells, if it's from a tropical system, it should be entered as a storm surge event, not a coastal flood event. Rip currents and high surf can also be entered in addition to that as applicable. So if you had 8-foot swells from a distant typhoon that didn't hit your area of responsibility, if you had, like, say your 8-foot or 10-foot swells that caused flooding, you would enter those as storm surge events. And then if they also caused rip currents, which led to fatalities, then you would enter them as rip current events as well. So you could theoretically have multiple events for event types entered for a typhoon which never hit your area of responsibility. Questions so far? You look like you're following, Joshua. You're nodding a lot, which is a good sign. You good? Okay. So example of what a hurricane or typhoon episode might look like. Here's from Hurricane Ida, just a snippet of the episode from WFO Slidell. So you can see there are hurricane events, there are tornado events, there's heavy rain, there's storm surge, flash flooding, all of those different events. And you can see here for St. Tammany Parish, they have a heavy rain event on this screen, a tornado event for this screen, and another tornado event on this screen. This is only a small subset of their entire episode, because if I put the whole thing for Ida on one image, it would be unreadable, because it's about 100 different events just for their WFO. but everything's done on a per county or per zone basis for every tropical cyclone hazard. Okay, rip currents. These are usually pretty straightforward. We get a lot of these stateside, especially the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. There are a lot there. We go through periods in the summer where, especially the Florida or the North Carolina, South Carolina beaches, there'll be hundreds of rescues on a weekend due to rip currents. So there are a couple of ways that you can. There are a couple of things to note when you enter these. Rip currents should only be listed when they cause a drowning or a near drowning or result in one or more rescues or damage to watercraft. If you get a report from a lifeguard or somebody else that there are rip currents there, that's great, but they don't meet the criteria. Rip currents themselves don't meet the criteria for being entered in storm data unless they cause, one of these instances of drowning or damage or something like that. You may have a dry or secondary drowning in which a victim is rescued from a rip current, and then they pass away later from the water that's retained in their system. That can also be entered in the program. There are other related events to consider as well. Not all of these are caused by rip currents, but some of them may be caused by high surf events, which can happen without rip currents. We don't have placeholders for all these different types of marine currents yet, but there are sneaker waves, longshore currents, a whole bunch of other things. I'm sure there are other ones that are specific, to the islands out there that I don't even know about. Right now, those use your best judgment for anything of those. You can enter them as high surf or sneaker wave or rip current if you have to. We do in the new program when we release it, we will have a new storm data event type called other marine / surf hazards or something like that, where things like longshore currents and eddy related fatalities and other things that occur that are more like regionally specific, we'll be able to put those in there rather than kind of trying to stuff them into an event type where they don't scientifically fit otherwise. And here's an example of a rip current event. Again, you can enter them. If you can enter them individually, you can enter one event for multiple rescues. Either way is appropriate. Either way is done by our offices. Obviously, in this case, there were this one event. There were 30 rescues in a 6-hour period. The office it's not reasonable to expect you to go in and enter all 30 rescues when you don't have that granularity of information. So you can enter one rip current event for a certain time period, say a day or a 2-day period with the granular information, but then just make sure within that event you include the specific fatalities or injuries as you have that information, and then elaborate in the event narrative. 50 rescues were performed on May 1st on such and such a beach. There were four injuries which resulted in folks being transported to local hospitals on Saturday morning or something like that. Any extra information you have that you can add to these is great, because rip currents are one of those things that are looked at by by agency leadership and also closely by outsiders. or external folks. They're kind of one of those, I'd say, headline grabbing items or headline grabbing events over the past 5 to 10 years or so that gather a lot of interest, whether it's, within the agency, media stories, things of that nature. And then drought, Landon mentioned you all have an ongoing drought out there. I don't know if that's still going, Landon, or not. Yeah, okay. So this information is pretty much straight out of the directives. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but just to highlight that, recall at the beginning I mentioned drought has to be entered on a per month and per event, per month and per zone basis. So if you have a year-long drought, let's say for 4 zones, that's going to be a lot of drought events, but unfortunately that's the only way to do it in the current program. Usually the drought we recognize in storm data the beginning time being when a region first reaches D2 or D3 drought or greater, but recognizing that there are a lot of regional variations in local variations in the level of impact that can be caused by a drought, that you can enter droughts that start at lower classifications if they cause significant impact to people, animals, or vegetation. So, a D1 in Louisiana is going to be far different from a D1 in rural Alaska, and we recognize that. So just, justify your entries appropriately for those droughts. And the directive has links to some of the resources if you don't know them, like the drought monitor. And then here I just put an example. There's a lot of ongoing drought out west the past, I don't know how many years, but been specifically bad since about this time last year up in Montana. So here's an example from October from the Glasgow office, showing some of their different drought events just for the month of October. Some of these are talking about droughts that began that month. Most of them are droughts that are continued or ongoing, and you can see in some of these larger zones where they've talked about D4 conditions in some areas, but only D3 and D2 in others, and the improvement that's taken place as well. So if you have the information and you have the time and you're able to add that level of detail to drought events, that's great. Obviously, not every office is going to have the information, the time, or the manpower to be able to do that, and we recognize that. Just, in general, I tell people with anything and everything storm data related, follow the science and use the information that's available to you and make your best efforts based on how much you have to work with and how much time you have to input it all. We do get into challenging situations, with offices in the South with severe weather season and tropical season where, they may get delayed on their storm data by 4 months sometimes because they just get hit by hurricane after hurricane after hurricane. They're trying to sort out all the information, or they're waiting for official death reports from coroners or medical examiners or the state or Department of Health or something like that. So that's usually what I tell people is, we know, I recognize that, storm data has become a bit of a burden on most people, a bit of a challenge on most offices. A lot of offices have a team concept now where they have anywhere from 2 to 8 people in the office working on storm data every month. So, your office and, your level of workload that it's going to be, and, do the best you can and come up with the best system you can. And I know Landon's trying to do that for you folks there, and we'll see if we can get if we'll see if I can figure out a way for Ian to help out in times of need if there's ever a shortfall of folks to do it for either of your offices. I'll look into that for sure. Any questions to finish up? Any more
Yeah,
questions?
I had one question, and regarding Ian helping us, I think the best way we just make this his responsibility. Are you good with that, Joshua?
What am I supposed to do then?
No, but I did have a question regarding the drought. I noticed
Yeah.
it says the beginning time is when it hits D2 or D3, and then it ends once it is no longer D3 or D2. But I guess it's kind of confusing since those are two different categories. So I think for our intents and purposes, we would just go with once it reaches D2 or once it's no longer D2. Um, as far as beginning and ending, it's kind of weird that they have a range like that for beginning and ending. But that's my perception.
Yeah, I think that's partly to recognize, Landon, that you can get like you can get in some areas you can get a flash drought and go literally from D0 to D1 to D3 in the matter of a month or even just 3 weeks.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I so
I've
I
heard
was
that
just
term before. I've heard
what's
that
that?
term before. I've heard the term of flash drought. I want to learn more about that actually, because I've heard it, but I don't know too much about that. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it tends to happen in areas where you get during the months where you get the like maximum evapotranspiration and you're starting out a little on the dry side and then you get maximum evapotranspiration and during the warm months and also continued period of no rainfall. I remember even here, we were in Northern Virginia. This was, I want to say, 2 years ago. We had a really wet May where we got, I would say, 5 to 7 inches of rainfall on average across the region. And the entire month of June, we got less than an inch of rainfall, and it was 95 to 100 every day. And by the end of the month of June, we were in D2 to D3 after above normal rainfall in May. So um, it can happen. It can happen. It does happen.
That's all I
Well,
had.
thanks for taking the time, Gordon. I know I really appreciate it, and everybody else does as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, Ian. And I'll take a look and see and see if I can come up with a way for you to be as kind of a backstop for these folks um, to see if there's a way where you can enter things on their behalf if they get really crunched for time or whatnot. And I'll follow up with you. We can have another short meeting, you and I, or me, you and Liz, however. And if I figure something out, I can walk you through it.
Yeah, that would be, I think it'd be really helpful. I know our region is kind of unique just in the size and the distance, so something like that, it wouldn't be needed elsewhere. Maybe we can use like the operational email accounts that each office has to log in somehow.
Um, no, because those emails can't really have accounts on our system.
They're not
So
people.
yeah, right, they're not people. So I think I know. I mean, I only know of one way we could put that it could potentially work, but I have to do some more research for it. But it would have to be you or Liz as your individual selves changing your
Okay.
office back and forth from time to time. But like I said, I'm not entirely sure that'll work, but I'm going to play around with it some tomorrow and see.
Okay. We can give it a shot. All right. Anyone else? Any questions for Gordon? And you can always email myself, or I'm sure Gordon doesn't mind an email or two when we have
Not,
questions.
yeah, not at all. You can email me directly. You can go through Ian and use him as a middle person, so to speak, if you're more comfortable that way. I get emails both ways from either directly from WCMs or Storm Data focal points, or from regional WCMs who get the. Some people are maybe just afraid to email me directly. I don't know, but yeah, you can reach out to me directly if you want, and I'm always quick to answer as long as I'm around. So
All right.
I'm here for
Great. Thank
questions
you very
anytime.
much, Gordon.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
All right.
Gordon.
So I'll talk to you soon with that other stuff.
Yep, I'll reach out once I know more. Once I know more, Ian, and see if I can make something work.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good evening over there. Still
All right.
afternoon here and morning in Guam.
Yeah, we're just all over the place.
Okay. Thanks
All right.
again. Bye bye.
Take care. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.